All right, we are live, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another episode of Let's Talk Lake County. I'm your host, David Rich. We have a total of 3 special guests on tonight. Alexandria Keating-Sofiakis will be joining us in a few minutes. She's stuck in traffic. However, right now we have Scott Free, who is a member of the Illinois Green Party here in Illinois, of course.
Yeah.
Scott Free, very cool name, by the way. Did I ever tell you the backstory about that? I'll tell you in a second. Russ Clark, who is a member of the Illinois Libertarian Party, lives down in Springfield. He is the Illinois Libertarian Party treasurer. Hello, Russ. Welcome to the show.
Hey, nice to meet you, Rich. Or nice to meet you, David.
That's okay. My high school buddies always called me Rich. Okay. At some point, I wondered if they forgot my first name was David. But anyway, so welcome, guys. So let's kick it off. We're talking about the role of government, very, very kind of a very philosophical topic, what is the proper role of a government in a society, if any at all? Some, there are anarchists out there says there's no such thing. So, let's, Russ, I'll let you start because I know libertarians are very big into this topic. Libertarianism being a political philosophy, not that Green Party members aren't. Oh, here she is. Wait, where is she? Hold on. There she is. Alexandria, hello.
Heyo. Sorry I'm late.
That's okay. We just got started like 30 seconds ago. Alexandria Keating-Sofiakis is also a member of the Illinois Green Party. She's been on my show a ton of times. And we're talking about the role of government. We're just kicking it off. I gave Russ the baton here to start it off with. Russ, go ahead.
Oh, sure. So the Libertarian Party position on government is that it should be limited. So we don't believe that government has a place in your bedroom, nor does it have a place in your wallet. The purpose of government is to defend the people or its citizen, the people living in that country against foreign adversaries that might seek to take it over, as well as provide for a cure against the disease of commons. So in other words, you might have we do believe in a clean environment, but we can get into that a little bit deeper. But we certainly believe that one of the cliches about us is that we complain about roads. In other words, we believe that people should pay for the people that use the road should pay for the roads. But in Illinois, our biggest complaint is that the road funds are not actually used for roads. They tend to be siphoned off into side projects, and then we get stuck with bad roads. So
I do delivery as a job, and I tell you, the roads around here are awful.
And it depends on where you are too. I mean, those could be county roads, those could be township roads, those could be city roads, those could be state highways. So there's various funding mechanisms for roads. It all depends on who's funding it and at what level.
All right, cool. Scott, you got some like a summary?
I don't know if I have a particular summary. And I am in the Illinois Green Party. I do my own show, Green Live Stream, and I voice my own opinions, which may or may not be part of the Green Party's overall philosophy. But I do want to say that I feel like, it's interesting that you have a Libertarian and 2 Green Party people on, and there could be tons of things to argue about. But I just feel like our system is in such a bad place that actually I think all the things that could discuss, we could both agree on, right?
Right.
Because, our system is so far away from having a balanced place where we could then fight libertarian versus green, right? We're just so far away from that. So as one example where I talked about, we should defend. That's what our country should be, to defend the country. I got no problems with that. The thing is 99.99% of our military has nothing to do with defense. As Russ, I'm sure, would agree. Yeah. So again, it's like we got so much work to do before we would be fighting with libertarians. So, you know what I mean?
Well, it doesn't
I mean,
necessarily have to be a
like,
debate as much as just, like I said, I was a member of both parties. And one
yes.
thing, I had Spike Cohen on the Illinois Green Party series when I was hosting it,
Okay.
who was the 2020 vice presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party.
Yeah.
And it was astonishing how many things we agreed on.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
There were some
Right.
new detailed differences for sure, but there was a lot of agreements, a lot.
And certainly the entire realm of how the two-party system tries to stop both of us is something we both agree on.
Oh,
I
yeah,
mean, it's
party
horrendous.
ballot access, all that
Oh
nonsense. Yeah,
my
for sure.
God, what they do
We
to
could
the
easily,
two of
we all
us.
agree on that one.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Alexandria, you got anything about the role of government and like in the most general brief of terms?
In the most general terms, I think Scott sort of touched on a really important point that in sort of broad views, like, for example, what you do in your bedroom and stuff like that, that the Green Party and the Libertarian Party don't disagree at any point. The really only disagreement comes with what the role of government should be in terms perhaps of like climate reconciliation or fighting climate change and stuff like that. How much support should the government give versus how much should that be private and stuff like that. But I don't think we're going to find, unlike, say, for Democrats or Republicans, where sometimes even in some debate stages, you'll find climate change existing at all is still somehow like the argument that they're arguing over. Like, there's no disagreement with that. There's no disagreement that the government isn't working for the people. There's no disagreement that common folks, people who aren't reliant on like APAC and other super PAC money, shouldn't be running our government. So there seems to be a lot of alignment in that. The main real difference is just sort of aesthetic, I guess, so to speak, and how you get into it, really, because like most Greens are going to be channeled in through like stereotypically progressive spaces, whereas libertarians aren't necessarily always going to be that. You'll typically have a bit more variety as far as like some of them might be from gun clubs that are also funded by the NRA, which, as I've never met a Green Party member that's had that. All pro-gun Green Party people are, through Socialist Rifle Association, typically, that I've met personally, at least. So
Okay, interesting. So one of the kind of historical contentions between big government versus little government versus no government is the notion of property. Okay, because you'll have like a lot of like one thing that a lot of people don't know. You just need to study the labor movements in the 1800s, mostly. Is that like the socialist groups or schools of thought? Because socialism means nowadays something very different than what it meant then. Back then, socialist schools of thought or socialist camps were anarchists. They were anti-authoritarian. That was the impotence and core of their ideology. Marx came along and said, hey, let's nationalize everything and let's do like the massive centralized force. But he had like a linear progression of events, historical events, which I think is one of the shortcomings of his system, because humanity doesn't work that linearly. Is that you would go from like feudalism to capitalism to socialism to communism, which is a stateless, classless, moneyless society. Good luck with that. But this notion of property is huge to it, because some people would say that property is actually brought about by the state. That with no state, there's no real such thing as property, because it's a contractually protected thing in government's secure contracts. Others say that the state is brought about by property. If you start with property, you're going to have some sort of governing body in order to protect it. So, like, Russ, what would you say about the libertarian view? Is like, I know that libertarianism is very capitalistic, and capitalism is an economic system that, in the most general sense, means the private ownership of capital. So, okay, what would you say to that about government role in property?
So, the government role in private property is to actually adjudicate property disputes. So, if I buy a piece of ground from somebody and then it turns out that person didn't own that land to begin with,
That'd be a problem.
Then the state can come in and adjudicate that, because if
Without
there is
shooting
if there is no state to do that, then basically I'm going to round up some of my friends and we're going to go beat the guy up, or we're going to, it's a much better way of resolving those kinds of property conflicts. Myself and libertarians do not believe that property comes from the state. Property is generated by work. So if I go, let's use the ancient analogy. If I go chop down a tree, and then build the canoe out of said tree, that canoe is mine because I cut the tree down and I chopped the wood up to make the canoe. It doesn't belong to the state per se.
Right.
Now, if I turn around and sell that canoe later to someone else, and maybe you have, maybe then they can do something with it. Maybe you have a record of it. So the state should be providing a function of just simply documentation and adjudication of torts. That's the technical term of it.
Right. Yeah, no, that's interesting because I mean I know that like the two kind of basic principles of libertarianism is that you own your body and your labor, and that's where the property rights you're discussing comes from. It's your labor, it's yours. That's it. Period. End of story. Scott, any ideas or opinions about property?
Well, you know what? I'm going to add to the discussion by, again, kind of coming from where I come from.
Oh, well,
So my issues and the reason I'm in Green Party, it's kind of a progressive place and a very open-ended place. Like I kind of intimated that a lot of people have very different ideas within the realm of the Green Party. Where my focus comes is not so much theory. I mean, I've tried to do Marxism. I've tried. But
he made some good points.
Yeah, no, of course.
But I think his whole system is highly problematic. But go ahead.
Well, I would say that I don't think it's so much problematic. I get the take that his opinion was that's where we're headed, and in a way, I can see that. I see our system as unsustainable. I think a collapse is coming, and so maybe out of that we will have the socialist / communist kind of, so that's how I look at it. And my viewpoint is one of a humanist viewpoint. So I'm not as particularly interested in the theories as how do we save humans? And let's say, how do we save animals? How do we save the earth? So it's a humanist concept that I come from.
Right.
So my concerns might not be the rules of libertarianism or even the rules of communism, as it is, how do we make sure this person doesn't starve to death?
So a more pragmatic, practical approach.
Right.
Like, what solutions can we employ to make things better for people?
Right. And so, it's wonderful to see a story of a millionaire giving, building 10 little homes for 10 little people. And that's just, wonderful, wonderful. But how do we get the society to not have homelessness? So that's where I feel like, yes, there is a role for government. Is it the right system or not? I don't care.
Maybe like a government, like sanctioned or functioning, like a type of welfare system, to whatever degree.
Yeah,
some sort of financial net for people who are kind of falling through the cracks.
A system that assures that people don't starve to death and don't freeze to death or don't. Now these days with climate change, die of heat exhaustion. So yeah, so that's where I come from. So, I don't know, maybe I'm not the best person for the high theoretical discussion type of thing, but again, that's
pragmatism
where
is an actual philosophy too. Like, enough of your high abstract, intellectual highbrow, like theoretical structures.
Yeah.
What works for us? That's
right.
William James, like the American pragmatist. I love him. Anyway, okay. So Alexandria, I'm sorry, Scott, were you done? I'm sorry.
No. I think that's kind of like where I'm coming from.
Alexandria, what do you think about property?
I tend to more subscribe to the very socialist, communist of not really viewing ownership as too much of a personal thing. Like, to use the sort of boat example, I still wouldn't view that necessarily as my boat because I didn't grow the tree. I didn't evolve trees. I didn't evolve myself the capacity or necessarily give myself, unless I was the first person to invent how to make a canoe, I probably got that knowledge from somebody else. I probably got the tools from somebody else. If I'm selling it to somebody, it's because I'm on an earth, a planet with other living beings of my own species I can communicate with and who are interested in it. So I tend to look at everything through a communal lens and not individual property so much.
Okay,
I'm more
interesting.
a believer of collective ownership broadly.
Yeah,
speaking.
and that is definitely one side of this issue of property, is that, like, there's this old adage that says, nobody owns nature. There's no such thing as a private ownership of nature. Now, that does not include labor, like you said, Russ, but like as a raw resource, this a government comes along, this is our mountain range. It's like, no, it's not. Did you build the mountain range? No, then it's not yours. Okay, so like to go from it, nobody owns it, to I own it because I labored over it, to some people, there's a little gap in logic there. What would you say to something like that, Russ?
So if we want to go with creation, there's obviously the biblical creation story, or we can go with the scientific one that says that the Earth's mass was spun out of the sun and cooled and created our planet. So there's no specific entity that owns the Earth, nor is responsible for the organisms that is on it. If you ascribe to that theory, I would say that if you are not claiming ownership of resources, then you're going to fall into that trap of my labor is not worth anything, because the resources, I didn't generate the resources. That's difficult. The reason that these kinds of theories fail is all stems from that communism does not answer the theory of value.
Of what? Of value, yes.
Of value.
Right.
So a canoe to somebody in the desert has no value. A canoe to somebody who lives around lakes and rivers and oceans has value. So if I'm trying to sell my canoe in a desert, then nobody's going to be interested. Maybe,
Right.
And it's going to ascribe no value. Me personally, I would never live in Malibu, California. You could will me a house tonight, and I would say it has no value to me.
Right.
So now I would turn around and naturally try and sell it to someone else who wants that house. But for me, it's not a place that I want to live. So value is zero.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and that's the main problem with a lot of these theories is that without value, then you cannot determine prices, and you cannot figure out. People are left in a lurch as to what they should do. So they're looking to government to tell them what to do. And that individual worker may or may not be suited to that work. They may not like the work. They may not be capable of the work. So, and then again, you're stuck between a rock and a hard place, and that government is then using force to make that person do something that they don't want to do, which is the definition.
Well, then you get into forced labor, which is the definition of slavery. Yeah.
Right.
No, that's very well said, and that you're spot on right. I think it was von Mises who, who's a champion, a forefather of the libertarian movement, especially on the economic side. Mm-hmm. Is the first one to point out as an economist that, because Marx said that things have value due to their labor. And as you pointed out, that's just not the case. Because if you could put all your labor into something, and if nobody buys it, it's not worth anything in the economic sense. It might have moral and sentimental worth to you, but that's it. Okay. Right. I mean, so the demand of the supply and demand dynamic is what creates value.
Correct.
Just the want and need from individual people is what creates value, commodity and service value. And that's it. Sorry, Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to try to bring in a kind of a practical example. At the very beginning, I said that one of the things that we're dealing with is, in this case, capitalism that has gone so to the extreme that here we are talking about property. And I've heard I don't know if it's socialist concept of that they say it isn't about taking people's properties away. It's
not your individual, concept, like my shirt is mine.
It's the concept that the problem we see in our current system is that BlackRock is buying up all the homes in the country. And so they will own everything and everyone will rent from them, subscriptions, right? So it's that extremist capitalist system that has brought us to that new problem. So it isn't that I don't want people to own homes or have the ability to own homes. It's the problem is that extreme capitalism has brought us to the point where that may no longer be possible because one company is going to own them. So
that's a very interesting point. And I want to give Alexandria a shot here first, then we'll go back to Russ Clark. But I do want to point out real quick that Marx drew a distinction between the means of production and personal property. He thought what was problematic in a capitalist system, and this is not exclusive to capitalism, by the way, that's another fault of Marxism, is that you had like one owner of, you had 500 people working in a factory and one guy owned it all. What happened to the ownership of your own labor and that kind of thing. But what you're talking about is like you have these billionaires who are like buying up, doesn't Bill Gates own like 500 million acres he wants to like grow stuff or something like that. So right. You have like individual people buying up gobs of land. Okay, but we'll talk about that in a second. Alexandria, what do you think about what we were talking about?
Oh gosh, you said Bill Gates and I thought of Microsoft and Xbox and Halo and I got distracted.
There you go.
I like that. Scott, I love you do that, buddy.
Yeah, I know. That's my thing.
Yeah, it got me started doing that. I didn't really have anything to add on to Scott's point. I thought Scott's point was a very, very great one because there's a difference, as we were just talking about, between personal property and means of production. And as someone, trying to think if there's anything interesting I could really add to that point, but honestly, not really.
No, it's okay. You can put a pin in it and we'll get back to you. Okay, so Russ, about what Scott was bringing up about like BlackRock or the bajillionaires buying up all these sorts of things, and I want you to keep in mind real quick that I've read capitalist articles on capitalism, stuff like that, where the capitalists themselves are not exactly happy about that either. Okay, that capitalism is supposed to be more of a fruitful way, organic, fruitful way for people within the human condition, human nature, to live a good life by selling their goods and services and buying them and that kind of thing. And these sort of like drastic extremes, like BlackRock's like BlackRock's like at the center of like conspiracy theories and stuff like that, like this international satanic cabal and all this other stuff. Russ, go ahead. What do you want to speak to on that?
So no, we're not happy about BlackRock either because you're taking money under false pretenses. Those people are BlackRock is an investment bank for those who don't know, or investment group, right. And so people are giving them their money to invest, and they're thinking that they're going to be investing in various businesses. They're not thinking that they're going to be investing in residential real estate, and right. All of those decisions are being determined by their corporate CEO. And it's gotten to the point where I think up until 2 years ago, their corporate CEO was voting the shares of individual companies however he saw fit, rather than putting them into a passive investment. In other words, if you buy an ETF, let's say that you buy an ETF of the S&P 500, the shares in that ETF, if it was managed by BlackRock or State Street up until a couple of years ago, were being voted by the CEO of State Street or BlackRock. Now, Fidelity, which is the other big investment house, they never voted those shares. And because of some good investigative work and acts by the state of Texas and a couple other states, BlackRock and State Street are not voting those shares anymore because they don't own those shares. Those shares are held in trust to individual shareholders who own shares of their exchange traded funds. So, BlackRock is on our bad company list anyways. Yes, exactly. But this investment in residential real estate really didn't happen until after 2008, when a lot of these investment banks got stuck with bad mortgage notes, and it's a hangover from them supporting and writing mortgage paper that the people who were buying the homes could never afford those homes to begin with. And when you tack that on with a regulatory structure at many of these municipalities that aren't allowing new residential homes to be built at the rate that they need to be built, you're basically creating a perfect storm for them to capture large sections of the residential real estate market in these homes. And there's no recourse for that because they can always outbid you.
Right. Yeah. No. Okay. Interesting. Okay. The two more topics about the government's role in them, and then we can call it government's role in education. Russ, go ahead.
Okay. So if electors in a state, if voters in a state want to create a public school district, that's fine with that. There's a public vote. What we object to is the cost of that public education, because the costs of public education in this country have gone through the roof, particularly at the university level, but also at the elementary
you
level.
Want to see my school loan bill? You want to see it? Go hard.
And it's all being driven by overhead, administrative overhead. It's not going into the classroom.
Right.
That money needs to be going into the classroom, just like it used to back in the 70s and 80s before we created the Department of Education. The Department of Education has been the sole driver of a lot of this administrative overhead. It's made public school budgets a freaking nightmare.
It's pretty bad.
And to the point where most boards don't actually understand where all the money is going, because there's so many federal regulations directing money to go into different piles of and it can only be spent on different resources. So we would like to go back to public education the way that it was when it was successful before the creation of the Department of Education. So we're not against public schools, and we're also for, if you want to homeschool, that's great. Take that on. We homeschooled our daughter for kindergarten because that happened to be the year that the schools were closed for COVID. And we're sitting here as parents, we're like, kindergartner is going to be logging on and sitting there for 4 hours and listening to a teacher, and they don't understand. They have no concept of email, none of that stuff. This is stupid. So we did the homeschool thing, and our daughter's so social. We wanted to put her back into a school setting. That's where she was going to flourish, and that's worked out well for us. But for some families, that doesn't work out well for them.
Right.
And that option needs to be available for them, and we support that full-heartedly. We are pro-parent.
All right, Scott, government and education.
Yeah, I'm not going to be able to speak to specifics of the Board of Education or the federal, but again, I'm just going to come from a point of humanity, right? Okay. And Russ talked about his particular family, and that's all fantastic. I worry about the kids that are poor that don't get educations. Right. So that I don't know of. I don't know them, right? But I care about poor children, and I know that the privatization of education has been destroying that concept of being able to educate poor children. And so that's where my focus would be. I would be against the privatization that's been going on for decades. And yeah, I mean, I think that we should have free education all the way through college, because we need an educated country. We need an educated country, or look what's happening as we're not having an educated country. It's absolutely, and look at other countries around the world that focus and make the priority education. They are doing much better than we are. So, and again, indices, maybe folks have different indices for what is considered better, but yeah.
So Scott, I want to ask you a question. If people want to have a private school, let's say that the Catholics want to have a school where they have religion classes that they teach them about Catholicism, is that okay?
Yeah, I'm not against allowing folks to have private schools or
You're against the privatization of all schools.
Privatization of schools, the destruction of the public school system.
Right. Which some people out there definitely want public schools gone. That's not.
Yeah, I mean,
that is present in our country and others.
Yes,
absolutely. Okay, I got you. So, and Russ, I think from what you said, you would agree with that. If public and private are both good.
Yeah, they're both good as long as there was a public vote to create the public school system. Then
Yeah,
that's okay. But
that
the
kind of thing
costs
is
need to
not,
be reined
and
in.
that I'm not a big fan. That whole like turning it down to the states. Again, I'm for the people. So I would want to make sure that there is public education for everyone, not just because you got some votes in a particular state. Not for that at all.
But public education is by definition for everyone.
Yeah, but not if it's dependent on the votes of no. It should be a federal. That's why if
Okay, so you think, I see. You think it should be a federal mandate that all states have to have public schools.
that yes, that
It's not a
has.
statewide.
I
It
mean,
wouldn't be left
it's
up to the state residents
yeah,
or the
this
county or the
idea of
municipals.
making it a states' right issue is not. I don't like, for the most part, I don't like any states' rights issues other than things that have to do with that actual geography. Like it's on a water. There's ocean next to
water
it.
rights,
Or
land
yeah.
rights.
Otherwise,
Okay,
that's such a weak excuse. I mean,
Okay.
that's yeah.
Alexandria, what say you?
Oh, Jazz, I lost my point again. What was? Can we go back to
Talking about the role of government in education?
Role of government in education. Thank you so much. I'm actually a little bit more extreme than Scott in that I'm not really a fan of any privatized education pre-college, just because there are just too many cases of it being used for indoctrination and misinformation, and also unequal outcomes on the economic basis. I remember I went from public school to St. Joseph's for 1 year because it was a better education. First off, that wasn't true. Second off, everything else there was very clearly much more better paid for. All the walls, all the school equipment, et cetera, and that money has to come from somewhere. It comes from the parents, and it's basically implicitly those parents saying that, hey, like I'm ensuring that my kid's getting a better education, getting a better safety even in the classroom than other kids are, which I don't particularly like. The big quandary I have at the moment with our education system is that it is constantly lagging behind, and it seems to be only getting further and further behind its international peers. And given how this current administration under Trump has been doing things, I'm wondering how we could best ensure that we basically get control of the actual education, what our kids are taught, to actual teachers instead of a bunch of weirdos who want to turn everything into a political kickball and stuff like that when they don't have any like long-term vision. Like Trump's war on the Department of Education is going to hurt our industrial base because less people are going to know how to work jobs. It's going to hurt our international competitiveness because we're going to be behind our international peers. It's going to hurt job readiness for the federal government as well. Just down the board. Education gives better outcomes. It also gives safer places as far as a whole society is concerned. If kids are in school and are excited to go to school and feel they have a purpose and a hope, they're far less likely to be moving around town causing any sort of trouble like that. So it's really like a communal thing that needs to be taught at that. And again, privatized education for like especially colleges and stuff like that, that would be the big drastic change to get rid of that. I'm not in favor of like,
because you're an adult, you can avoid indoctrination, or you're free to choose what you want, that kind of thing. Okay.
Yeah. If you want to do that after that, go for it.
What you're saying though, Alexandria, ties into what Russ was espousing, and something I think about what Scott said about like how it should be at the federal level is that our education system nationally is on average gone down since the inception of the Department of Education. The Department of Education was supposed to make it better. The exact opposite has happened. Russ, I'll give you the last word on this topic, and then I want to talk about healthcare in the government, and we'll call it a day. Go ahead.
Right. The results are irrefutable. The Department of the Department of Education at the federal level has been an absolute failure. It's been a source of indoctrination for whatever the government does.
Right.
In other words, whoever's in power, they push their indoctrination through the Department of Education. It's gotten really worse since 2000. The stuff that's been spewed out of that organization has been demonstrably horrid. You've removed the trades from high school, so you've got hundreds of thousands of high school graduates that don't understand that you can go be a plumber and make six figures overnight. They will pay you to learn how to be a plumber, and then you go make money. You don't have to go to college. That was all taken out in around 2009 in the big push to push everyone to college. Not everyone's fit for college. I've got 2 older stepkids. They're not college material. I hate to say that about my own kids, but
No.
they're not. They're not.
College is not for everybody. It's just
it's not
a 4-year degree is not for everybody, or master's
That's
or
correct.
PhD. We need trades too, guys. Okay, you need people to build the schools that the other people are going to. Okay, to install the electricity and the plumbing and everything else. And you're absolutely correct. And like I remember, just growing up in the '80s, watching that like push towards like white collar jobs and the like the need for like college degrees to get you were a better person if you sat at a desk all day than you were if you were using your hands a hammer to hammer in a nail. Okay, and there was a huge stigma that of division that happened there, and I think it's caused a lot of resentment in this country from both the white collar and blue collar vantage points. I hate that. I mean, I have a master's degree too, and my main profession is gardening. I'd rather know off my own tongue than sit in a cubicle for a day. I'm not doing it. But I love education. I love learning. So that's why I went to school for me. I didn't go to school to get a job. So anyway, Scott, obviously you want to say something? Go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to say, okay, everyone hates the Department of Education. Make it better. I mean, getting rid of it is absurd. Okay. Like turning it into like states. Well, again, it's just an absurd idea. We don't have to get rid of something. We could improve it. Scott, now you're gonna go to the next topic of medical insurance that we can get rid of.
Yeah, okay, Scott, I do want to say one thing. So the Department of Education prior to 1980 did exist. It was more of a clearinghouse. They took statistical information from the states. They were the ones that generated the national literacy rate.
Okay.
It was much more of a clearinghouse. It was not something that drove curriculum. The states controlled the curriculum.
Gotcha. No, but Scott, that's a very interesting point because I watched this thing called Rising on the channel The Hill. Do you ever watch that? Robbie Soav and anybody heard of it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and Robbie Soav, he says he's a libertarian, but you hear him like spell certain policies. I'm like, you do not know a libertarian. Anyway,
okay.
But he has this disposition and frustrates the hell out of me that like, oh, the FDA did this 2 things wrong. Get rid of it.
Yeah.
The WTO did 2 things wrong. Get rid of it. Like, you need to slow down there, tough guy. Okay. Let's see if we can like maybe fix it instead of just abandoning something that could potentially be a good idea. I get what you're saying. And Russ, I also agree with what you're saying. Like it has not shown itself to this point to be advantageous. Okay. Can we move on to healthcare?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. Role of government in healthcare. I know what all you were going to say. Russ, go ahead.
Yeah.
So the cost of healthcare has just become obscene. Much like the Department of Education, it's being driven by a lot of overhead. We also do have a very, very fat pharmaceutical industry, and it's gotten unreal. Now, some of that is because they've been able to finagle new ways in the Obamacare Act to make things a specialty drug, so then they drive up the prices. The price of insulin prior to Obamacare passing was about $3 for $3 to $5 from what some of the diabetics that I know have talked about for a vial of insulin. To almost $700, and it's come down a little bit, but they're still paying over $300 for a dose if they were to pay cash, not through insurance. So it violates the very spirit of that drug. If anyone has done any research on insulin, the discoverers of insulin basically patented it and then made it to basically wrote it to Eli Lilly saying you have to charge this for the cost that you make because this is such life-saving medicine, we can't imagine making a profit off of it. So that's why insulin was so cheap for so long. And now you've got little worms all riddled throughout our entire healthcare industry that just do nothing but just drive up prices. We believe that hospital charge masters should be made public. That was something that was done during the first Trump administration. The problem is that there's no enforcement actions. I still can't go to a hospital's website and find out how much they're charging for a triple bypass. That should be something that people should be able to look up. Now, obviously, you don't want to be researching triple bypasses when you're having a heart attack.
No.
But you should be able to know who's providing good care at a reasonable price. And right now, it's a black box. You go into the hospital and you have no idea how much you're going to be charged on the way out.
Right. Okay. Well said. Scott?
Yeah, actually, I mean, as you would expect, I'm going to say that we should have a government health care like the VA,
like
to
a single
such a degree. I would say VA health care to such a degree that they can have a private health insurance. It will probably go out of business in a year because the cost would be so astronomical. But at its basic, the public option. But again, I mean, I watch television and see Medicare Part C commercials every single day. So I mean real like government healthcare, not fake tricking old people into signing up for something they think is Medicare and is private. So, but yeah, we just need healthcare. We don't need that industry. It's a fake industry. It doesn't need to exist. Now for the
insurance industry.
Yes, the medical right, health insurance doesn't need to exist. Now for the ultra wealthy, they can have it. I'm not trying to outlaw it, or I wouldn't say outlaw it, but obviously it would be like astronomical costs to do insurance for, 1,000 people in the country when everybody else should just have healthcare. I mean, a basic. It's in every other developed country. It's the most absurd thing to even argue around when you look at every other country. Now they're trying to destroy them. They're trying to destroy them in Britain and other places. But the reality is they've existed in many, many, many other countries. And it's sick that we have to even deal with medical health insurance.
Yeah, no, and I want to say something real quick about that. When I was growing up in the 80s, my parents had health insurance that was easily affordable to them. And my parents were like smack dab in the middle of the middle class, not high middle class, not low, just pretty typical stuff there. But I like our doctor, as kids get sick more often, on average, than adults do. I would go to the doctor's office, or maybe my sister, and they would pay out of pocket because it was affordable. They could do that. It didn't bankrupt us or anything else. And for the big stuff, like I had some sort of weird surgery when I was a kid. I don't even remember what it was for. It was something weird. The insurance paid for that. The insurance was for the big stuff. Now insurance is for everything. But that came from Obamacare. Obamacare was, right, wrong, or indifferent, Obamacare was an insurance mandate. Okay. And healthcare costs have gone up exorbitantly since then. So, I mean, every time I go to the doctor's $200 every time. When before in the 80s, it might have been $20 because you had private health, doctor's offices. Now it's all networked, North Shore and University of this and blah, 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 that. And it's monstrous. And also another, like, rarely does any problem in society or in economies have to do with one measly little thing.
Yeah.
Healthcare, medical technology is advancing as well. And there's regulations on doctors having to use these $8 billion machines when they might not have to. We should all come back on and talk about it. All right, Alexandria, what do you have to say about healthcare and rural government?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Scott. I mean, the Green Party generally advocates for more universal healthcare, Medicare for all. I absolutely agree with that. I'm just on the moral grounds alone. I mean, just saying, hey, you have to give me money so that I could save your life. Excuse me.
But then you go into then you're going into
how can I contribute to society if I'm dead?
Yeah. You can't. But I understand your point, Alexandra. I think from a moral vantage point, that's correct. But now you're talking about unpaid labor. Like a doctor is supposed to not get paid for being a doctor.
Not necessarily. Well, what I'm trying to say basically is, as we were talking about earlier before, is that the ideal society that I think most Greens view, and myself included, is a post-money society, is to get to that as soon as possible. At the moment, of course, doctors need to be paid, because at the moment they're being charged to live in a house, they're being charged to have water, they're being charged to have food, they're being charged to exist. So like we have to pay.
They have to pay $300,000.
But if they could
for the
exist
medical degrees.
freely, then they should have like some, at least, if not legal, moral incentive to help people if they're getting their needs met, because that's the profession.
Okay, Scott, go
You
ahead.
signed up to help other people. If you don't want to do it, then do a different job.
Okay.
Well, and also, I mean, every other country, their doctors are doing fine. They're not doing it for free, right?
No, you have salary caps. I think in England it's like maxes out somewhere like around $100,000. And you're right. I've seen interviews with those doctors. Like, we're fine. It's fine. Come on.
Yeah,
we don't need to make $500,000 a year. I understand what you're saying.
But David, I think you made a good point when you said, to become a doctor, how far in debt do you have to go? Right?
I worked at OHSU in Portland when I was going to school at PSU, and I lived on the Hill, which is where it was at. It's a med school too, and I lived amongst a bunch of med students. We became really good friends. I'm still good friends with a lot of them today. I remember the numbers: $325,000 for a med degree.
Yeah, and
that drives up the cost of healthcare too, because they have to pay that back, and they want their money. They want their profit to live their lives. So they want, after all their costs and bills and everything else, which are ample because they have to plus a mortgage when they buy a house and cars and they have kids. It's insane.
It is. And that's why, like I was saying, I don't know if Marx was necessarily wrong with that. When he talks about the steps of where we get to, because I don't see how this is sustainable. I don't see how we're
that
living
in and of itself
in a sustainable country. And we haven't even mentioned climate change. Some people still don't believe it, but I mean, talk about unsustainable.
Well, no, of course. All right. Well, I'm going to end it there. And perhaps if you all want to, because I really enjoyed this. Did you guys enjoy it?
Yeah, it was fun. Yeah, that was great.
Good.
I mean, again, I'm not good at theory. You might want to get somebody who's more theoretical.
You're fine. Your points had validity. So like maybe we can get you back on and talk about a series, a different set of topics, whatever else. Something that kind of gets at the craw of both the Green Party and the Libertarian Party, as long as we remain civil. Okay, so I think this was a very civil, friendly, good conversation. I appreciate you all for coming on. Thank you so much, Russ, Scott, and Alexandria. Till next time, everybody, keep talking. Hold on.